All right, Mr. Gray, you're classified as a first felony offender. You were sentenced on August 10th, 2010 for an aggravated incest, and you received a 15-year DOC sentence. Your parole eligibility date was October 25th, 2014. You don't earn good time, and so your full term date is October 27, 2024. Is that information correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Would you answer Mr. Marabella's questions?
Good morning, Mr. Gray. My name is Tony Marabella. How are you?
I'm all right, sir. Thank you.
I've got a few questions I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind answering me, please. You've been in prison, is it 10 years? Is that correct?
Yes, sir. 11 years.
Almost 11? Okay.
Yes, sir.
And how old are you?
I'm 49.
Tell me a little bit about your work history, both in prison and out of prison. What kind of work did you do before you came to prison?
Prior to coming to prison, sir, I was a truck driver. I worked at concrete trucking companies, and prior to coming to Louisiana, I worked as a truck driver at Public Works in Baytown, Texas.
Okay. And what kind of work have you done since you've been inside?
I've worked for the chaplains. I was a chaplain clerk for a couple of years, and I assisted the chaplain in a lot of programs, Celebrate Recovery programs at LaSalle Correctional Center and also at Catahoula Correctional Center.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about some of the programs that you have done while you've been there.
Yes,
Did
sir.
you do Celebrate Recovery? I mean, obviously, if you assisted with the programs, you I assume you took Celebrate Recovery.
Yes, sir. I did. I've taken it several times. I took it, and it has done some remarkable things for my person. I've learned a lot from that program. And
tell me a little bit about what you've learned.
About taking accountability and responsibility for things in your life that you've done and trying to make amends to some of the things that you've done in your life. And it's very vital to have a support group, and it's very vital to have individuals that understand you, that sympathize with you, that you can reach out to before you make any errors in your life.
Okay. Along those lines, did you have any kind of a drug or alcohol problem?
No, sir, I did not.
Have you ever used drugs?
No, sir, I didn't. I have not.
Never smoked marijuana, never dabbled or anything?
No, sir. The reason being, my dad, he was addicted to drugs, and my aunt, she was addicted to drugs, and that steered me away from doing any type of narcotics.
Okay. How about alcohol? Did you drink?
On occasions, I've drank, and my mother's family is Catholic, and that's how we celebrate. We have a few drinks around the holidays and different festivals.
Okay.
But I have drank for casual purposes.
All right. You talked about Celebrate Recovery. You talked about accountability. You talk about taking responsibility for your actions. You were convicted by a jury of the charge of aggravated incest. I wasn't there, but I know Judge Anderson. I know he's a fair judge. Apparently, the jury heard all of the evidence. They believed the witnesses, and they convicted you. Yet you still contend you didn't do any of these things. Is that still your position today?
I don't believe that I've done anything wrong, but
well, you know what you were charged with. You were charged
Yes,
with aggravated incest. Now, under any circumstances, inappropriately touching that young woman is a crime. Now, Did you do it or didn't you?
No, sir.
So your position is, I didn't do it. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes, sir.
All right. Tell me what sort of sex offender programs or sex offender treatment you've had while you've been in prison.
When I was at the satellite camp, they didn't have the program. I asked for the program to be shipped somewhere with the program. And eventually, because all of the satellite camps were turning, into federal facilities, they eventually shipped me to Hunts last year. And in Hunts, that's whenever they enrolled me in the program and they sent me here. When I got here, I asked again if I could get put in the program. At that time, I did not know that I had any eligibility for parole. I was under the impression that I had to do flat time.
Well, let me stop you. Are you telling me that since you figured it wasn't going to help you to take the classes to get out early, you weren't interested in taking them?
No, sir. I was interested in taking it prior to learning about it assisting me. I didn't know that I was even eligible. I was taking it because I thought that was something that a sex offender would have to take regardless, whether they got out on parole or got out in any type of situation.
You were correct in your thinking that a person who is convicted of a sex offense has to take sex offender treatment before they're released. Now, from what I'm hearing, you haven't had any yet.
I was in the class and the coronavirus shut us down. I finished the book, but when they were turning in, and I was able to finish the program because of the COVID.
Well, tell me what you learned in the sex offender program.
I learned it was 27. It's 27 different situations. I don't really recall the precise.
What have you learned as it relates to you, Mr. Gray? What did you learn? How did you better yourself by taking these courses?
I've learned that I cannot do things like going to certain establishments that would promote any type of activity like sex stuff, like going to strip clubs and stuff like that, or looking at movies and things like that. I learned that that's not something that you
Did you do those things before?
Yes, sir, I have done those things before.
Is that something that may have had to do with why you're charged with these crimes?
Maybe, yes, sir.
What about your disciplinary record? You've got a pretty good disciplinary record. I don't show any write-ups. How many write-ups have you had?
I hadn't had any write-ups. I had one, but it didn't go anywhere. They wrote it up, but they didn't go any further with it. We had a disagreement about a religious stance. I had said something in one of my sermons I preached, and they didn't agree with it. So they wrote it up, and then it didn't go nowhere. So I didn't hear anything else of it.
So, Mr. Gray, before we kind of stop, I just want to make sure that we're still talking on the same level here. You're
Yes, sir.
telling me that you did not commit this offense. After taking the class, after realizing that you're not supposed to be going to strip clubs or watching porno and all this other business, you're saying you didn't do anything inappropriate with your stepdaughter.
I don't believe I did, sir. I don't think I did anything inappropriate.
Well, were you on alcohol or drugs?
No, sir.
How would you not know that you did or you didn't? Do you have any sort of mental issues? Do you take any kind of medication?
Oh, they were trying to prescribe for me some mental issues. They said that I'm schizophrenic. But
Well, who is that? Who said that?
the medical staff here said
Have
that
you taken any kind of medication?
no, sir, I have not.
Have you been prescribed any kind of medication?
They hadn't prescribed the medicine for me. They just diagnosed me with schizophrenia.
And when was that?
That was last year. I believe at Hunt's is when they diagnosed me with it.
But they didn't prescribe any medication or give you any sort of treatment?
They had suggested that I take some, but because I hadn't had any episodes, they didn't enforce it.
What do you mean they didn't enforce it? They gave it to you, but you didn't take it?
No, sir, they didn't. They hadn't just prescribed it to me. They had said, they gave me the option to take it or not, and I declined from taking any medication because I'm already on medication for diabetes and blood pressure, and I didn't want to be on any other type of medication.
Mr. Gray, there's nothing you can do about this, but there is opposition to your being paroled. Is there anything you'd like to say to those people who oppose your parole?
Yes, I've suffered. I'm suffering now. I've suffered for 11 years. I mean, I don't know how much more y'all want from me. How much more you want? You want me to die?
Mr. Rayburn, I understand you may very well have some mental issues that you're dealing with. And this hearing is, of course, about you, but there's a victim involved in this case. And I'm concerned about that as well. You don't seem to be concerned about the victim in this case at all. It's all about you.
I was told that I couldn't, when I was going through my proceedings in court, after I bonded out, they said you cannot have any contact.
I hear that. I hear you saying that, but I'm asking you now, what would you say to the people who opposed you? And your comment was, I have suffered enough. What about the other people that have suffered?
If I caused any suffering, I deeply am sorry and I apologize.
But you don't think you've caused any suffering?
I have caused suffering. I mean, around the board. Yes, I have.
Warden, could you give us any information on Mr. Gray?
He's only been at Rayburn for right at a year. As you mentioned, he doesn't have a lot of write-ups, but I believe he could benefit from probably some more treatment.
Okay. Thank you very much. Madam Chairman, that's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Mr. Marabella. Mr. Jones, are there any questions?
I don't have any, no questions.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any questions. I think, and I can't see him on my screen. I think we have Nathaniel Gray with us. Can we hear from Mr. Nathaniel Gray? I'm going to ask staff, is he still with us on the phone?
Ms. Renanza, we're trying to get in contact with him. He's not connecting to audio.
Okay, well, we'll just move on until you make that connection. Ms. Parker, we'd like to hear from you, ma'am.
Hello, can you hear
Yes,
me?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Verlika Parker, and I'm the victim in this case. And I would like to say that I am not comfortable with Anthony's getting out. I don't feel as though Anthony has done anything to heal himself or done anything to make me believe that, you know, he has changed. I feel as though Anthony just feel as though I feel as though that Anthony hasn't taken any, you know, any initiative to say he's sorry or took any accountability for his actions. I feel as though I'm the only one. I'm getting blamed for something that he has done. I do not want Anthony to be paroled. I'm not comfortable with Anthony being paroled. With me being a victim, I think Anthony should serve more time, his full time. I also think Anthony should do some classes or something to get rehabilitation. Or I don't see no empathy, no sympathy or nothing for me being a victim. It's all about him. And being the victim, I just don't think Anthony at this time should be released from custody.
Thank you. We do appreciate your input. Did we reach Mr. Gray yet? I suppose not. So could we hear from the DA's office, Ms. Porter?
Hi,
Good morning.
good morning. Sonia Cartier-Porter, I was the prosecutor on this case. I worked with Ms. Parker through the prosecution. The defendant was exposed to a significant amount of time. He was not sentenced to the maximum. I think he should serve every single day that he was sentenced. The benefit was that he wasn't given the maximum. I will say that even hearing the victim talk today, the impact that it's had on her life, this case even had an impact on me. I don't drive by a library, look at it as I did before this case. I know that the victim bears the burden of the actions of the defendant, and he has taken no responsibility even today. So I think some more time, the amount of time that he was sentenced, would be great benefit to him and society.
Thank you. We appreciate the input from the DA's office. Thank you so much.
Ms. Renata, we
Yes.
have him through the headquarters microphone.
Okay, great. Mr. Nathaniel Gray, good morning.
Good morning.
We'd like to hear from you. What would you like to tell us about your father?
Well, I mean, I've never known my father to be a bad man in any type of way. And I really like for him to come home. He has a lot of family that misses him. And he's not only my father, he's my best friend. You can check our call out. Like I talk to him regularly. I wish I could talk to him more, but I mean, with all this corona and everything going on, times are hard, so I can't talk to him as much as I would like to. But I would really love to have him here with me. I missed he missed a lot of things in my life, a lot of important things that he went away right when I was becoming a man. So it's a lot of things that I wish he was here to help me with. Still to this day, I have children and stuff I could use as advice to, sons, and I would like to raise them how he raised me. I really want him home. I mean, if there's anything I can do, I'll pay for treatment out of pocket. Whatever. If there's anything I can do, I'm willing to do it.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. We appreciate you spending some time with us this morning and sharing those remarks. Mr. Anthony Gray, is there anything you'd like to say to us before we reach a parole decision?
I'm trying to get my life together. I just don't know. I'm trying to do right. I'm trying to get my life together and get back to my family.
All right, sir. Thank you. Is the panel prepared to vote?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mirabella.
Mr. Gray, I was not sure how I was going to vote today after reading your file and reading through everything. You've done fairly well while you've been in prison. You have no write-ups to speak of. And under our system of law, even though you had been convicted by a jury, you have every right to claim your innocence. And I accept that. That does come with consequences because the jury has, in fact, found you guilty of aggravated incest. You have not taken, in my opinion, sufficient sex offender treatment. Perhaps not necessarily your own fault, but you haven't done it. In listening to the warden, hopefully we might be able to get you some programs that you would be make you available next time potentially for parole. You seem to maybe have some emotional issues that might need to be treated. There was a point in time during our discussion when I asked you, what do you say to the victim? Did you do anything wrong here? You hesitated for a long time. I know it's very difficult to admit and concede that you've committed this particular crime. If you haven't done it in your mind, well, stick to your guns. But if you have, one of the ways of healing and moving forward is to concede the fact that you've done it. Otherwise, you'll never be able to move on. My vote today is to deny with the recommendation that you take sex offender treatment and that you listen to what those things happen and you come to grips with who you are internally and admit to yourself whether you actually did this or not. That would be my vote.
Thank you, Mr. Marabella. Mr. Jones?
Yes, Mr. Gray, I agree with Mr. Marabella. I've watched you, I've listened to you in this interview this morning. You're close to admitting you're wrong, but you just can't come to grips to saying it. Sex offender classes and come to grips with it. And I can only imagine there's got to be something real hard for you to, through your actions and everything, it's there. You just got to come to grips with it. But good luck to you. And my vote today would be to deny also.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Gray, I do concur with my colleagues. My vote today also is to deny based on the opposition that's been expressed here this morning and the need for additional programming. Good luck to you, sir.
What's more shocking to you? What's more shocking? That this monster does this to his child, his stepchild, and then sits here at his parole hearing and denies it? Or is it that this person actually goes to a trial, is found guilty by a jury, and the judge only sentences him to 15 years? We'll go through the documents of this. But the idea that a judge, after this man is found guilty and convicted by a jury of his peers for aggravated incest, and the judge only gives 15 years? So who should we be upset at more? Should we be upset at the monster? Or should we be upset at the judge? And then you might say, well, I mean, what was the maximum sentence that he could even get? And at this time, the maximum sentence that the judge was allowed to give for the crime of aggravated incest was 20 years. I'm not making that up. Legislation is written by people who frankly are nuts. We've gone through this before. I don't think we need to go through it now, but you get more time. You'll get more time for possession of marijuana if it is your third offense over the course of a decade. Possession, not possession with intent to distribute. Possession. You can't make this stuff up. But again, the insult to injury is that even after they went through the cost and expense of going to trial, even after this young victim, survivor, really is forced to testify on the stand, and even after he is found guilty, the judge still says only 15 years. And not to mention, this guy has a track record. We'll go through it in the PSI report. He's been arrested before. Not for this, but for severe felonies. And he's been revoked from parole. He doesn't have a great record. You know, when they say we just want to give a plea deal, we don't want to put them on the stand, and that's why they do it. And then even in the case when they have the trial and they put it on the stand and they take all the financial expense and all the trauma, and still you have a judge that would give 15 years. And then he shows up at his parole hearing and I don't know what, he actually has the audacity to call his stepdaughter a liar. And then his son comes on and says, I want him to raise my, what did he say? To help raise my grandkid? Like he raised me or something. I was like, what planet are you? I just. Let's go through this. So the defendant was charged with the buildup of information, right? He pled not guilty. Following a jury trial, was found guilty as charged. At sentencing, the trial court sentenced the defendant to 15 years of imprisonment. The defendant made an oral motion to reconsider the sentencing for being excessive. The trial court denied the motion. The defendant now appeals, designating one assignment of error. We affirm the convictions and sentence. Facts. These are facts, sir. You cannot deny these facts. I didn't really understand what Mr. Mirabella was going there, was saying, you know, either you own it or you don't own it. I mean, Mr. Mirabella should have just said, you were found guilty by a jury of your peers. Like, the survivor is there in the room watching this. Don't even leave it for any room of doubt. She is not making it up. And thank goodness the DA was there. The ADA. Although, you know, they talk out of two. Well, actually, no, the ADA did a good job in this. We got to give the district attorney every, you know, they didn't do a plea deal, right? They did a great prosecution. The maximum was 20. They found him guilty, and the judge undermined everything. And for that person who's never held, why would the judge not give the maximum? It doesn't make sense to anyone with like, I think a proper functioning mind could not understand. Let's sit down with the judge and say, Judge, why did you not give the maximum? Let's hear what he did to her. In 2001, the defendant married Kimberly Gray, who had 3 children from a previous relationship, including her daughter, VP. VP testified at trial. She testified at trial from 2002 to 2004. She, her siblings, her mother, and the defendant, the stepfather, lived in Baton Rouge in 2 apartments and later in a house at Willow Oak Avenue. In both of the apartments, when VP was 12 years old, this is in both of the apartments, right? This is going over the span of multiple years. When she was 12 years old, the defendant began touching her. And it describes where he touched her. You can read it right here. The defendant also made VP show him herself while he would pleasure himself. In the house, when VP was 12 and 13 years old, the defendant made VP lay on his bed and expose herself while he would then pleasure himself. Sometimes the defendant placed his thing on her. The defendant also made VP stroke him until, it's right here. You can read it. The defendant threatened to hurt VP's mother if she told her. The defendant testified at trial and he denied all allegations of abuse. So again, judge, how you could possibly be qualified as a judge. Why 15 years? There is no way you can justify the sentence of a monster. But there it is. Now, on top of it, the insult, the disgusting nature of this entire process. The trial court has a discretion in imposing a sentence with the statutory limits, and such a sentence will not be set aside as excessive in absence of manifest abuse of discretion. Louisiana Code of Criminal Procedure Article 894.1 sets forth the factors of the trial court to consider when imposing sentence. While the entire checklist not be recited, the record must reflect that the trial court adequately considered the criteria. The judge should review the defendant's personal history, his prior criminal record, the seriousness of the offense, the likelihood that he will commit another crime, and his potential for rehabilitation through correctional services and other confinement. Wow, this judge just really blew it, huh? In the PSR report, the trial court provided a detailed accounting of the defendant's personal history. This is what I was talking about earlier, including a conviction in Texas for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. According to the PSI, the defendant was placed on probation because why not? I mean, it's just, right? What's the big deal? And in 1997, his probation was revoked. What a shocker. And he was sentenced to 3 years in the Texas Department of Corrections. The trial court allowed the prosecutor to read a letter from VP, the victim, addressed to the court, and described how the defendant's actions impacted her life. Let's hear about this letter, the same letter that the judge would have heard right before sentencing. She stated that the defendant took her childhood away and that sometimes she did not want to go on because of the things he had done to her. You hear that, Judge? 15 years, really? She also stated that the pain has never gone away and that she wanted the defendant to get enough time in prison to think about how he ruined her life for his gain. Man, she is awesome. She is, and the idea that the judge would slap her in the face by not giving the maximum is sick. The trial court noted that based on VP's statements, the fact that the defendant knew or should have known that VP was particularly vulnerable because of her youth. Wow, that's real rocket science right there. And the fact that the defendant used his position of status to facilitate the commission of the instant offense, the Office of Probation and Parole recommended in its PSI the defendant be sentenced to the maximum sentence of 20 years. Can you believe again that that's the maximum? Finding the defendant in need of correctional treatment and custodial environment, the trial court sentenced him to 15 years. Clowns. They're a bunch of clowns. They really are. We find no manifest abuse of discretion. I know every judge is different. It's not a blanket statement on every judge, but this judge certainly is a joke, in my opinion. We find no manifest abuse of discretion by the trial court. The trial court provided ample justification in imposing a 15-year sentence to the defendant for aggravated incest of his stepdaughter, a person who is supposed to protect from such evils, but instead he abused his position of trust. Sentence affirmed. Well, there you have it. There you have it, right? Hold on a second. And, you know, he... Sorry, I had to come... But and you hear, even at his interview, he's crying for himself at his interview. Pathetic. What do you want me to do? Die in here? Yeah. How about that? It doesn't sound like a bad idea. It's like you just can't. It just doesn't make sense. And it's the beautiful thing about this stuff being posted on YouTube and about all of us watching it, I think, is that it eventually, I do think that this information being made public will drive some type of change. You know, I believe that the only reason that these type of sentences, this type of injustice, disgusting injustice exists is because no one realized it. No one was aware of it. You know, you would have these victims that would just be made to feel alone. No one would understand it. No one would, it would just happen. It's not making a newspaper. It's not, no one understand. But now, when people see this and they can actually say, Judge, why would you give 15 years? When people could say, well, DA, why would you recommend this type of sentence? And eventually people are going to be starting to be held accountable. And that's the only thing that can drive change. It's and I think that with time, I don't know how long it will take. Will it take 10 more years of this, 15 more, 20 years? But eventually this will be a catalyst, I think, for change. And sentencing in Louisiana have been getting a little bit more stringent for these type of cases. But it's just not enough. But also, I know that my mic had gone out on the earlier unpacking, and I've read the comments. So I just want to say a few things. One is, thank you. It made my day that I saw so many of you write things like, we're here for the unpacking, or I wanted to, know what happened, or man, dude, this is like the 5th time it's happened. And that actually was a real confident booster, because I mean, it means a lot to me. So I know some of you said, well, you should check your uploads each time you do it. And you're not wrong when you say that, but I do, I think I've uploaded over 1,000 uploads in the last, 15 months or something. And out of those 1,000 uploads, there's probably actually close to maybe 3,000 hearings where I do individual recordings. And I think that I probably screwed up like this maybe 10 times, give or take. So when you look at it from a percentage point of view, it's, I don't know, I'm not very good at math, but I think that would be like 1/10 of 1% or something. So these things will happen, but it shouldn't happen, especially at this stage when I'm supposed to be an expert at doing this, or at least getting good at it. Now, there's a few reasons that it could be happening. There are different failure points. One is that, like, if I somehow click the mute button on my keyboard and then I don't know it's muted, everything seems to be right. Another is that I hit the mute button on my microphone, or the cable on the microphone pops out, and when I pop it back in, it's not clear to me why it sometimes happens. I've tried to solve this by having like a visual. I downloaded a software that would, it shows the lines, so I would be able to visually see if it's getting my voice or not. But it just wasn't like matched with my microphone. It wasn't intuitive. It wasn't easy to use. on my old microphone, which was kind of a very entry level microphone, I used to get feedback in my ears, which I kind of do a little bit, but not to the extent that I need it, where I can know if I'm muted or not. So maybe I upgrade to a different microphone that I get that feedback. I don't know if it's a malfunction of my microphone that my new one does not do that, or if it's just designed not to do that. I don't know. This microphone I think is like $150, and hey, I'm doing so many hours of recordings. Maybe I should invest in a proper microphone. There are $500 microphones, but I do need to find a way. For me, there's nothing more frustrating than uploading it and not having my voice there. And I do sometimes check. I just had the other day where I did a whole unpacking, and I checked, and my voice wasn't recorded, and it was frustrating. I was like, "Are you?" Because I lose a part of me. And I don't lose a part of me, but there's the authentic part when you vent initially, and then if you have to do a second recording of it, it loses that authentic aspect, and also drains some energy when you talk about this stuff. So to do it again, and I do all my unpackings on one take. I don't do two takes. I don't edit it. I don't and I don't listen to it. And I know some of you said, well, you should listen to it, but it's I guess it's just never been part of my style to listen to myself, because then you start to be self-critical, and you wish that you would change something, and it's just not, for me, that's not the way. I do it and I ship it, and then I'll listen to myself if at the 7 p.m. Eastern time premieres that we do together. Then I'll listen often, and I'm like, oh. And when I listen, I usually say something like, man, I wish I had said something differently, or I can't believe I said that. I actually feel this way about it now that I heard it again, and that's just part of what it is, right? That's just part of what it is to record your thoughts on one take. But again, thank you all for writing. It did mean a lot to me. And with that, I'll let you go.